This is David Sloane bringing you an update from what's been going on at the Water Conservation Centre. It's the 9th of May and we are about to plant next week, and I thought it was time to give you an update on how we've positioned ourselves moisture-wise coming up to planting. And thankfully we've had a lot of rain recently, and so that's been awesome to fill the profile. We started pre-watering, but let me show you how things panned out. First up, let's look at what happened after the corn that was planted on the west pivot. So we can see that the corn actually used quite a lot of water. We're looking at the summary graph, so this is really like the gas gauge of what was going on out in the soil. And we can see we put a late irrigation on, and then the soil ended up quite dry. But thankfully, just after harvest, we actually got some rain in September, late September, and then we got some more rain in November, and it did a really good job of filling the profile. And so these blue bars here, that signifies the rainfall. I got a little bit of moisture over the winter, but then we put a pre-irrigation on. So it was just 7/10 of an inch, and you can see that step back up. The reason that was put on was mainly to incorporate some herbicide. And then, of course, we've had some rain over the last month, and that's really helped wet things up. So we've had about 3¼ inches, and really now, if you look at where we are, we're very close to the full point. But also, if you go back to where we were this time last year, we're actually significantly wetter. So we are really good to go. We've hardly had to pre-water at all. In fact, if we didn't put on that irrigation to incorporate herbicide, we'd still be in really good shape. So that's looking good. So now let's have a look at what happened after the cotton crop. So this cotton crop, it took a lot of moisture out of the ground. It really took probably about 10 inches or even more. And so when we got that late rain in September, didn't do much at all. I think the crop used it. And so where we finished out back in November at harvest time was very dry soil. You can see that we had about 4 inches, I think, 4½ inches of moisture in November, and that did a really good job of half wetting the soil. And then we sat there over the winter, but we actually had to start pre-watering pretty earnestly. So we put a 1.4 inches on in March, and then we put another 2 inches on in the middle of April. And so those are the steps. We can see the little teardrops where we're indicated where the irrigations are. And then what we can see is that the rain that we've had recently, so there's been about 3¼ inches of rain. It's really only that last week where we've had about 2.8 inches of rain that things have really wet things back up. So we're still not quite where we were a year ago coming into the season, but we're not far off. If I turn off the rainfall here and we look at the moisture graph, what this does is it looks at the different layers of down through the soil. And so we can spread these apart a little bit, and we can see that the second irrigation, which was the 2-inch irrigation, it started to move that grey line upwards and even soak through a little bit to the pink line. So that's 40 inches down. Not bad. But when it rained, we can see that that's jumped straight up. And so even 4 feet down, that rain's penetrated down there. We can look at the pink line and look back to where we were. We've done a really good job of wetting this soil. So once again, no more irrigation required. This is going to get planted to sorghum this year, and we're in good shape. So while I'm still on the east pivot, let's have a look at where we grew sorghum last year. And so we were sharing water with the cotton crop on the east pivot, and so we were able to keep it pretty wet and then dry it down. And you can see where the stair stepping finished. That's because we cut it for silage, and so it basically stopped dead. And then we had some rainfall. Didn't really see much of that because it was probably held in the upper foot where it was above where the buried probe is. But then when we got into the rains in November, they did a pretty good job of wetting the profile back up. We did plant it to wheat, and there was a little bit of regrowth of sorghum, which obviously had a winter kill. But what we can see in here is that, I can zoom in on that, once we got into March, we start to see some stair stepping, and that's because that wheat broke dormancy and it's starting to use some moisture. And so I'll zoom back out and we can have a look and see that we got some rain, but even that rain didn't make it down to wet the soil even a foot down. The top had dried out, and so that first bit of rain here just stopped the crop, the wheat, from using any more. We did hit it with herbicide, and it did eventually die, but it took a little while. And now that 3¼ inches of rain, it's almost 3 inches in the last week, has really done a great job of wetting that profile back up. So once again, you can see where we are today compared to where we were a year ago, and things are in good shape. So if I once again go to what we call the moisture graph and have a look at the individual layers, what we can see under here is that the wheat crop, it started to get going. It was even just starting to get its roots down to that red line 2 feet down, but that rain has gone all the way through. It's gone down 4 feet. So that rain has been a blessing. It's done a great job of really positioning us for the crop that's going to follow, which will be a cotton crop. Finally, let's look at where we grew forage sorghum on the west pivot last year. Now remember, we were sharing water with corn, so we actually dried the profile out a lot more on this side growing forage sorghum than we did on the east pivot. And once again, you can see where that crop was cut, and then we actually got a really good wetting event. So we saw that ground take the water in, but also I think there was some regrowth of the forage sorghum, and so it took most of that back out again. But what we got was the ground cover for the winter. We got into into November, and we got the 4.5 inches of rain in there, which really did a good job of wetting things up. But once we broke dormancy, we could really see that wheat that was planted as a cover take a bunch of moisture out. And so it's actually, we were probably a little late with that kill. It was really growing quite rapidly, and so we can see the effect of the rain, and certainly because there was a good wheat crop, those roots really sucking that moisture in. And so we got each of these rainfall events, we can see them going into the ground. And if we have a look at the moisture graph, what we can see here, and I'll just spread these apart a little bit, is that every time it rained, we can see that water moving down to the second foot, not getting below that, but that red line was moving. And then finally, once we got a big rain event, it started to push through, and it's actually wetting all the way down to 4 feet. So still a little bit of room to get some more water in, but not a lot. Once again, we're in good shape. This is going to get planted to corn this year, and so we've got plenty of opportunity once that seed's in the ground to irrigate slowly and finish off filling that profile.